hotel maid stopped a millionaire and told him not to enter the room with his wife. The next morning, there were 3 men in black and a luxury car near her humble home. The scent of industrial-strength disinfectant and old money hung heavy in the air as Barbara Clark pushed her cleaning cart down the marble-lined corridor of the Hotel Royal Palace's top floor. At 45, she'd perfected the art of invisibility. Head down, movements efficient, never making eye contact with the wealthy guests who glided past her like she was part of the furniture. 5 years. 5 long years. She'd walked these same hallways every Thursday night, mopping floors that probably cost more per square foot than most people made in a month. The irony wasn't lost on her. Though she'd buried that bitterness so deep, it rarely surfaced anymore. "Excuse me, miss." A crisp voice cut through her thoughts. Barbara looked up to see Mrs. Wellington, one of the hotel's regular patrons, standing beside her designer luggage. The woman's pearls caught the light from the crystal chandelier overhead. "Yes, ma'am." Barbara's voice came out rougher than intended. She'd learned to speak softly in this place, to blend into the background like wallpaper. "Could you be a dear and clean around my door? My husband tracked in some mud earlier." Mrs. Wellington's smile was polite, but distant, the kind reserved for service staff. "Of course, ma'am, right away." Barbara watched the woman disappear into her suite, then sighed. Some things never changed. Rich people still treated her like she was invisible, which, she supposed, was exactly what she needed them to do. She pushed her cart toward the Wellington suite, but something made her pause outside room 2847, the presidential suite. The door was slightly ajar, unusual for this time of night. Through the crack, she could hear voices. One voice, actually. Angela Price. Barbara's blood turned to ice water in her veins. She knew she should keep walking, mind her own business. That's what she'd done for 5 years. Kept her head down, stayed invisible, survived. But something about Angela's tone made her pause. It was cold, calculating, the kind of voice that meant trouble. "Eric, it's time." Angela's words drifted through the crack in the door, each syllable crystal clear. 15 years we've been waiting for this moment. Barbara's hands gripped the handle of her mop bucket so tight her knuckles went white. Eric, that name hit her like a punch to the gut, dragging up memories she'd fought so hard to bury. "Yes, tonight," Angela continued, her voice carrying that same icy certainty. "When he takes his chamomile tea, you know how religious he is about that bedtime routine. It'll all be over, and tomorrow, finally, the entire Taylor empire will be ours." The words hung in the air like poison gas. Barbara felt the world tilt sideways. Michael Taylor? Angela was talking about Michael Taylor, and she was planning to. "Don't worry about the dose," Angela's voice continued. "I've tested it 3 times. Enough to stop a horse, but it'll look like a heart attack. Natural causes. The perfect crime." Barbara's legs nearly gave out. She grabbed onto her cart to steady herself, the metal frame cold against her sweaty palms. Angela Price, Michael Taylor's elegant, seemingly devoted wife of 3 years, was planning to murder him, tonight. But it was the mention of Eric that made her stomach churn with terror. Eric Price, Angela's supposedly dead brother, the man everyone believed had died in a car accident 2 years ago. The man who'd been pulling Barbara's strings like a puppet master for the past 5 years. The man who held her daughter's life in his hands. "The timing has to be perfect," Angela was saying now, her voice growing more animated. "He gets back from Houston at 11. He'll be exhausted. Probably won't even question why I'm being so attentive with his tea. Men are so predictable." Barbara forced herself to breathe. In and out. In and out. She had to think, had to figure out what to do. But her mind was racing in circles, trapped between terror and an emotion she thought she'd killed years ago. Love. Because despite everything, despite the years of separation, despite the lies she'd had to tell, despite the new identity she'd been forced to create, she still loved Michael Taylor, had never stopped loving him, even when she'd been forced to let him believe she was dead. The conversation inside the suite had gone quiet. Barbara realized she was holding her breath, straining to hear more, but there was nothing now except the soft hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. She looked at her watch. 10:47 p.m. Michael would be back any minute. Her hands shook as she gripped the mop handle. What was she supposed to do if she warned him? Eric would know she'd betrayed their arrangement. And if Eric knew, Sarah, sweet, innocent Sarah, who was supposed to be 20 years old now, her baby girl, who'd been taken from her when she was just 15, the daughter she hadn't seen or held in 5 years, who was somewhere out there, alive only because Barbara had kept her mouth shut and done exactly what Eric demanded. But if she stayed quiet, Michael would die tonight. The man she'd loved with every fiber of her being, the man she'd sacrificed everything to protect, would be gone forever. The elevator dinged at the end of the hall. Barbara's pulse hammered in her throat. Heavy footsteps echoed off the marble floor, accompanied by the soft roll of luggage wheels. She knew that walk, had memorized it years ago, back when she had the right to listen for it coming home. Michael Taylor rounded the corner, looking every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. Though exhaustion showed in the slight slump of his shoulders, his dark hair was streaked with more silver than she remembered, and there were new lines around his eyes, but he was still the most handsome man she'd ever seen. He glanced at her, through her really, the way people looked at service staff. No recognition flickered in those familiar brown eyes. Why would it? The woman he'd loved was supposed to be dead, and Barbara Clark looked nothing like Mary West had 15 years ago. "Good evening, Mr. Taylor," she managed to whisper as he passed. He nodded absently, already pulling out his key card for the presidential suite. In 30 seconds, maybe less, he'd be inside that room with his wife, his murderous wife who was waiting with poisoned tea. Barbara watched him slide the key card into the lock. The little light flashed green. His hand was on the door handle. She'd run out of time. The decision hit her like lightning, sudden, terrifying, and completely inevitable. She couldn't let him die, even if it cost her everything, even if it cost Sarah everything. Some things were worth dying for. Love was one of them. "Mr. Taylor," the words escaped Barbara's lips before she could stop them. Louder than the whisper she'd intended, Michael paused, his hand still on the door handle of the presidential suite. He turned slightly, those familiar brown eyes focusing on her for the first time in 5 years. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched in every line of his face, the weight of running a billion-dollar empire pressing down on his shoulders. "Yes." His voice was polite but distant, the tone he reserved for staff. Barbara's mouth went dry. What was she supposed to say? That his wife was planning to poison him? That the brother-in-law he thought was dead was very much alive and orchestrating his murder? That the woman he'd mourned for 15 years was standing right in front of him, disguised as a janitor? She swallowed hard, her throat feeling like sandpaper. "There's a problem with the plumbing in your suite, sir. Water damage. You can't go in there tonight." The lie came out smoother than she'd expected, but Michael's frown told her he wasn't buying it. "Water damage. I wasn't informed of any maintenance issues." He pulled out his phone. "I'll call the front desk." "No." Barbara's voice cracked with desperation. "Please, Mr. Taylor, just trust me. Don't go in that room tonight." Something in her tone made him pause. His finger hovered over his phone screen as he studied her face more carefully. Barbara felt exposed under his gaze, as if he could see straight through the brown contact lenses and the carefully applied makeup that had changed the shape of her features. "Do I know you?" The question was soft, almost to himself. Barbara's heart hammered against her ribs. "No, sir. I'm just the night janitor." But Michael didn't move toward his suite door. Instead, he took a step closer to her, and Barbara caught a whiff of the cologne he'd worn for as long as she'd known him. The scent hit her like a physical blow, bringing back memories of lazy Sunday mornings and stolen kisses in hotel corridors, just like this one. "Your eyes," he said quietly. "There's something about your eyes." The elevator dinged again. Barbara's blood froze as Angela Price stepped out, looking radiant in a silk nightgown and matching robe. Her blonde hair was perfect, her makeup flawless. Even at this hour, she was everything Barbara used to be: polished, elegant, worthy of Michael Taylor's love. "Darling." Angela's voice was honey-sweet as she glided toward them. "You're back early. I was just preparing your tea." Barbara saw Michael's posture change, becoming more formal, more distant. The warmth that had been creeping into his voice when he looked at her vanished completely. "Angela," he kissed his wife's cheek dutifully. "This woman was telling me there's some kind of plumbing issue in our suite." Angela's green eyes flicked to Barbara, and for just a moment, Her perfect mask slipped. There was something predatory in that gaze, something that made Barbara's skin crawl. Plumbing issue. Angela's laugh was like wind chimes in a hurricane. Beautiful, but somehow ominous. I haven't noticed anything. The suite is perfectly fine, darling. Barbara felt trapped between them, her lie crumbling around her. But she couldn't back down now. Not when Michael's life hung in the balance. Ma'am, with all due respect, there's definitely water damage behind the wall near the tea service area. The words tumbled out of her mouth, each one a desperate attempt to keep Michael away from that poisoned chamomile tea. Angela's smile never wavered, but her eyes went arctic cold. How odd that housekeeping would know about damage in our private suite. Perhaps you're mistaken. I'm not mistaken. Barbara met Angela's stare head-on, drawing on reserves of courage she'd thought were long dead. Mr. Taylor shouldn't go in there tonight. It's not safe. The tension in the corridor was thick enough to cut with a knife. Michael looked between the two women, clearly trying to make sense of what was happening. Barbara could practically see the wheels turning in his head. Successful businessmen didn't get to where they were by ignoring their instincts. You know what? Michael said finally. Maybe I'll take a different room tonight. I'm exhausted anyway. And if there's even a chance of maintenance issues... Michael, that's ridiculous. Angela's voice had an edge now, her perfect composure starting to crack. I've already prepared everything. Your tea is getting cold. The tea can wait. Michael's tone was firm, the voice of a man used to making executive decisions. Barbara. He paused, and Barbara realized he'd remembered her name from her uniform tag. Thank you for the warning. Could you arrange another room for me? Barbara nodded quickly, not trusting her voice. Her hands shook as she reached for the phone on her cleaning cart, a direct line to the front desk that all housekeeping staff carried. Front desk. This is Barbara Clark from housekeeping. Mr. Taylor needs an alternative suite tonight. The presidential suite has maintenance issues. She paused, meeting Michael's eyes. Something about the water system could be dangerous. As she hung up, she saw Angela's face cycle through a range of emotions. Confusion, anger, and something that looked almost like panic. The perfect wife mask was slipping fast. This is absurd, Angela said, her voice rising slightly. Michael, you're letting a janitor dictate where you sleep. She's obviously confused about something. But Michael was already walking toward the elevator. I trust my staff, Angela. They've never steered me wrong before. He turned back to Barbara. Thank you, I appreciate your diligence. The elevator doors closed behind him, leaving Barbara alone in the hallway with Angela Price. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. That was very interesting, Angela said softly, all pretense of sweetness gone from her voice. Very interesting indeed. Barbara kept her expression neutral, though every instinct screamed at her to run. Just doing my job, ma'am. Your job. Angela took a step closer, her green eyes glittering dangerously. And what exactly do you think your job is? Barbara Clark. Keeping the hotel clean and safe for guests. Safe? Angela rolled the word around on her tongue like she was tasting wine. How thoughtful of you. Tell me, Barbara, how did you know about the water damage in my suite? I don't recall seeing any maintenance reports. Barbara's mouth felt like cotton, but she forced herself to speak. Sometimes we notice things before they become official problems, ma'am. It's part of staying ahead of issues. Angela smiled, but it was the kind of smile that belonged on a shark. I'm sure it is. Well, thank you for your vigilance. I do hope you'll continue to be so. Attentive to detail. The threat was barely veiled, but Barbara stood her ground. Always, ma'am. Angela turned and walked back toward the presidential suite, her silk robe flowing behind her like liquid poison. At the door, she paused and looked back. Oh, and Barbara, in the future, perhaps it would be better if you cleared any concerns about guest suites with management first. We wouldn't want there to be any misunderstandings. Barbara watched Angela disappear into the suite, her heart still racing. She'd done it. She'd saved Michael's life, at least for tonight. But at what cost? Angela knew something was up, and it wouldn't take long for word to get back to Eric. Her phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number, but she knew who it was from. Interesting evening. We need to talk soon. Barbara closed her eyes, feeling the walls closing in around her. She'd bought Michael one night, maybe two, but Eric was already suspicious, and when he got suspicious, People got hurt, specifically. Young women named Sarah got hurt. The next morning dawned gray and cold over Chicago, matching Barbara's mood perfectly. She'd barely slept, tossing and turning in her cramped studio apartment, jumping at every sound. Eric's text had been like a sword hanging over her head all night. "Interesting evening. We need to talk soon." She knew he'd find out what happened. Eric always found out everything. That's how he'd stayed hidden for 2 years while everyone believed he was dead, pulling strings from the shadows like some twisted puppet master. Barbara was nursing her 3rd cup of coffee when the pounding started on her front door. Not knocking, pounding. The kind that made her cheap apartment walls shake, and her downstairs neighbor's dog start barking. "Police, open up." Her heart nearly stopped. Police. Had someone already found Angela's body? Had the poisoned tea killed someone else? But as she crept to the window and peered through the blinds, what she saw made her blood run cold. 3 black SUVs sat outside her building like a presidential motorcade. Men in expensive suits and dark sunglasses stood at attention, their bulges under their jackets making it clear they weren't your average cops. And there, stepping out of the middle SUV, was Michael Taylor himself. "Ma'am, we need you to open the door." The voice was professional but firm. "Mr. Taylor would like to speak with you." Barbara's hand shook as she unlocked the deadbolt. What was she supposed to do? Run. Where could she go that Eric wouldn't find her? Besides, if she ran now, Michael would know something was seriously wrong. She opened the door to find herself face to face with a wall of security. The man in front was built like a linebacker and had eyes that had seen too much violence. "Ms. Clark, I'm Agent Martinez, Mr. Taylor's head of security. He'd like a word." Barbara nodded, not trusting her voice. The security team parted like the Red Sea, and Michael Taylor walked through, looking every inch the billionaire businessman, even in casual khakis and a polo shirt. His brown eyes were sharp, alert, studying her face like he was trying to solve a puzzle. "May I come in?" Barbara stepped aside, acutely aware of how shabby her apartment must look to someone who owned half of Chicago. The furniture was secondhand, the carpet was stained, and the whole place smelled faintly of the Indian restaurant downstairs. This was a far cry from the penthouse they'd shared back when she was Mary West. Michael walked to the center of her living room, his hands clasped behind his back. He moved with the same confident stride she remembered, but there was something different about him now. Harder, more cautious. "The tea," he said without preamble. "The toxicology report came back this morning." Barbara's knees nearly buckled. "Sir, cyanide, enough to kill a horse according to the lab." His eyes never left her face. "Someone tried to poison me last night, and somehow, a night janitor knew about it before it happened." The silence stretched between them, heavy with unspoken questions. Barbara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel sweat beading on her forehead despite the apartment's chill. "I need to understand how you knew," Michael continued, his voice deadly quiet. "And I need to understand why your eyes are so familiar to me." Barbara closed her eyes, trying to think of a lie that would satisfy him. But what was the point? The lab results proved she'd been right about the poison. There was no way to explain that away with stories about plumbing problems. "I overheard something," she said finally. "Your wife, she was on the phone, talking about putting something in your tea. You overheard my wife planning to murder me. And instead of calling the police, you decided to warn me personally with a story about water damage." When he put it like that, it sounded insane. Barbara wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly feeling very small in her threadbare robe. "I didn't think anyone would believe me," she whispered. "I'm just a janitor. She's Angela Price Taylor, one of the most respected women in Chicago society, who's going to believe that she's trying to kill her husband." Michael studied her for a long moment. "That's a fair point, but it doesn't explain everything." He took a step closer, and Barbara caught that familiar cologne again. "It doesn't explain why I feel like I know you." Barbara's breath caught in her throat. Even after 15 years, even with her changed appearance, some part of him recognized her. The connection they'd shared had been too deep, too fundamental, to be completely erased by colored contacts and subtle plastic surgery. "Sometimes people just have familiar faces," she managed. "No," Michael's voice was firm. "This is different. Your voice, the way you move, something about the way you look at me. I've been trying to place it all night." He was getting too close to the truth. Barbara could see it in his eyes, the way his brilliant mind was working through the puzzle. She had to give him something, some explanation that would satisfy him without revealing everything. "Mr. Taylor, there's something else you need to know." Her voice came out steadier than she felt. "About the person your wife was talking to on the phone." Michael's attention sharpened. "Go on." "She called him Eric." Barbara watched Michael's face carefully. "She said they'd been waiting 15 years for this moment." The color drained from Michael's face. "Eric Price is dead. He died in a car accident 2 years ago." "No, sir, he didn't." Barbara took a shaky breath. "Eric Price is very much alive, and he's been using me for the past 5 years. He's been blackmailing me, forcing me to spy on you." Michael staggered backward like she'd hit him. "What?" "He has leverage over me, something I can't fight against." Barbara's voice broke slightly. "He made me take the job at your hotel, made me watch you, report on your activities, your schedule, everything. I never wanted to, but I didn't have a choice." "What kind of leverage?" Michael's voice was deadly quiet. Barbara closed her eyes, feeling tears leak from the corners. This was it, the moment where she had to decide how much truth she could tell without destroying everything. "He has my daughter." The words hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. Michael's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, shock, and something that looked almost like recognition. "Your daughter?" "Sarah." The name came out as barely a whisper. "She's 20 now. Eric took her when she was 15, during a school trip. He said if I ever tried to find her, if I ever stopped doing what he asked, he'd kill her." Michael went completely still. "Sarah." "Yes, sir. Sarah is... That's my daughter's name. My daughter who disappeared 5 years ago." Barbara's heart stopped. She'd said too much, gone too far, but there was no taking it back now. "Sir, How do you know my daughter's name?" Michael's voice was raw with emotion. "How do you know about Sarah?" Barbara opened her mouth, then closed it again. How could she explain without revealing everything? How could she tell him that the daughter he'd been searching for was the same daughter she'd been mourning? That Eric Price had torn their family apart not once, but twice. I heard things. Working at the hotel, you pick up things about the guests." But Michael wasn't buying it anymore. His businessman's instincts were in full gear now, connecting dots that Barbara wished would stay disconnected. "No," he said slowly. "That's not it. There's something else. Something you're not telling me." He took another step closer, his eyes boring into hers. "Who are you really, Barbara Clark?" The question hung between them like a live wire, dangerous and crackling with electricity. Barbara felt the walls of her carefully constructed life beginning to crumble. 15 years of hiding, of being someone else, of protecting the people she loved by staying dead. All of it was unraveling because she couldn't let the man she loved die. "Who are you really, Barbara Clark?" Michael's voice was quiet, but there was steel underneath it. The voice of a man who'd built an empire by never backing down from the hard questions. Barbara could see it in his eyes. He wasn't going to let this go. Not now. Not when his daughter's name had entered the conversation. She turned away from him, walking to the small window that overlooked the alley behind her building. The view was depressing. Dumpsters, fire escapes, the backsides of buildings that had seen better days. It was a far cry from the lake view they'd shared in their penthouse, back when she had the right to wake up next to him every morning. "You want to know who I really am?" Her voice came out hollow, defeated. "You're not going to believe me. Try me." Barbara pressed her forehead against the cool glass. In the reflection, she could see Michael standing behind her, his entire body tense with anticipation. God, he was still so handsome. The years had been kind to him, adding distinguished silver to his temples and laugh lines around his eyes, though she suspected there hadn't been much laughter in his life lately. 15 years ago, she began, her breath fogging the window. There was a fire at a country house outside Chicago. The newspapers said it killed a young woman, a wife and mother who died trying to save her 5-year-old daughter. She heard Michael's sharp intake of breath behind her. The woman's name was Mary West. Mary Taylor, after she got married. Barbara's voice grew stronger, more certain. The papers said she was a hero, that she died getting her little girl to safety before the roof collapsed. Her husband mourned her for years, built a memorial garden in her honor, never remarried, Because he said no one could ever compare to the love of his life. Stop. Michael's voice was barely a whisper. But here's the thing about that fire, Barbara continued, turning to face him. Mary West didn't die in it. She escaped through the back door, hid in the woods until the fire department arrived, and watched her whole life burn to the ground. She watched her husband cry over her empty coffin. She watched her little girl grow up in photographs from a distance. Michael was staring at her like he'd seen a ghost. His face had gone completely white, and she could see his hands trembling at his sides. She had to let them think she was dead. Barbara pressed on, the words pouring out of her now like water through a broken dam. Because if she didn't, Eric Price would have killed the people she loved. So Mary West died in that fire. And Barbara Clark was born from the ashes. No, Michael shook his head violently. No, that's impossible. Mary is dead. I saw the body. I identified. You identified what was left after a house fire, Michael. Dental records from a homeless woman who died that same week. Eric paid off the coroner. Switched the records. It wasn't hard. Mary had never been arrested, never been in the military. There weren't many dental records to compare against. Michael staggered backward until he hit the wall, his legs seeming to give out. He slid down until he was sitting on the floor, his head in his hands. This isn't possible, he whispered. Mary is dead. She's been dead for 15 years. I mourned her. You loved her. Barbara's voice broke as she said it. You loved her so much that you never got over losing her. Even when you married Angela 3 years ago, it was never the same. You were settling, trying to fill a hole that couldn't be filled. Michael looked up at her, then really looked at her, and Barbara saw the moment recognition finally clicked into place. Even with the brown contact lenses covering her natural blue eyes, even with the subtle changes plastic surgery had made to her nose and cheekbones, even with 15 years of hard living etched into her face, he saw her. Oh my God. The words came out as a gasp. Mary. Barbara nodded, tears streaming down her face. Hello, Michael. He struggled to his feet, moving like a man in a dream. One step toward her, then another, until he was close enough to touch. His hand came up slowly, trembling as he traced the line of her cheek. Your eyes, he whispered. I knew there was something about your eyes. I had to change everything else, Barbara said, leaning into his touch despite herself. But I couldn't change the way I look at you. For a moment, the years fell away. They were just Michael and Mary again, young and in love and planning their future together. But reality crashed back in like a cold wave. Michael dropped his hand and stepped back, his expression cycling through confusion, anger, and something that looked like betrayal. 15 years, he said, his voice getting stronger. 15 years I thought you were dead. 15 years I blame myself for not protecting you. Do you have any idea what that did to me? Michael, Sarah. His voice cracked on their daughter's name. Sarah grew up thinking her mother was dead. She used to cry herself to sleep asking why you left her. Do you know what it's like trying to explain to a 5-year-old why mommy isn't coming home? Each word was like a knife to Barbara's heart. She'd known the pain her decision would cause, but hearing it laid out like this, seeing the devastation in Michael's eyes, it was almost unbearable. I know, she whispered. I know what I did to you, what I did to her, but Eric would have killed you both if I hadn't disappeared. He made that very clear. Eric Price. Michael's voice turned cold. Tell me everything right now. Barbara took a shaky breath. 15 years ago, I found out that Eric and Angela were having an affair. They were planning to kill you and make it look like an accident, so Angela could inherit everything. When I confronted Eric about it, he threatened Sarah, said if I exposed them, if I told you what they were planning, he'd make sure our little girl had an accident too. Michael's hands clenched into fists. So you faked your own death instead. It was the only way to protect you both. Eric said if I disappeared forever, if I let you believe I was dead, he'd leave you alone. Call off the assassination attempt, I thought. I thought I was saving your lives. But you weren't. Michael's voice was bitter. Because here we are, 15 years later, and Angela just tried to poison me anyway. Barbara nodded miserably. Eric lied. He always planned to kill you eventually. He just needed time to set up the perfect scenario. Get Angela married to you so she'd inherit legally. Make sure there were no suspicions. And Sarah. Michael's voice was dangerous now. What happened to our daughter? Barbara closed her eyes, steeling herself for the hardest part. When she turned 15, she started asking questions about me, researching the fire, trying to understand what really happened. Eric found out she was digging into the past, and he decided she knew too much. He took her, during the school trip to Washington, D.C., made it look like she'd wandered away from the group and gotten lost. But she didn't get lost, Michael. He took her, and he's been holding her ever since. Michael's face went through a series of emotions: rage, grief, determination. When he spoke again, his voice was deadly calm. Where is she? I don't know exactly. Eric moves her around, keeps her hidden. But she's alive, Michael. I've been doing everything he asks for 5 years to keep her alive. Everything he asks. Understanding dawned in Michael's eyes. The job at the hotel, spying on me. He made me watch you, report on your schedule, your habits, your security measures, all so he could plan the perfect time to strike. Barbara's voice was barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Michael. I never wanted to betray you, but I couldn't let him hurt her. Michael stared at her for a long moment, and Barbara could see him processing everything. The betrayal, the deception, the impossible fact that his dead wife was standing in front of him. 15 years, he said finally. 15 years of thinking I'd failed to protect the people I loved most. And all this time, you were alive. Michael, no. He held up a hand, stopping her. I need time to process this. I need to figure out what the hell we're going to do now. He turned toward the door, then paused. Eric Price thinks I'm dead. What? From the poison? Does he think it worked? Barbara shook her head. Not yet. But Angela will report back to him soon, when she realizes you're still alive. Then we don't have much time. Michael's voice was all business now. The successful CEO taking charge of a crisis. If Eric has Sarah, if he's been pulling the strings all this time, then we need to move fast. He looked back at her one more time, and Barbara saw something in his eyes that gave her hope. Not forgiveness, not yet, but determination. We're going to get our daughter back. Mary, and then Eric Price is going to pay for what he's done to our family. Michael stood at the window now, his back rigid with tension as he stared out at the Chicago skyline. Barbara could see his reflection in the glass, the hard line of his jaw, the way his hands were clenched behind his back. She knew that posture. It was how he looked when he was making the kind of decisions that affected thousands of people and millions of dollars. Tell me everything, he said without turning around. From the beginning, every detail. Barbara sank onto her secondhand couch, suddenly exhausted. The weight of 15 years of secrets was crushing, but there was also a strange relief in finally telling the truth. It started 3 months before the fire, she began. I was pregnant. Michael spun around, his eyes wide with shock. Pregnant. 8 weeks along. We hadn't told anyone yet. Remember how we wanted to wait until the second trimester? Her voice caught with the memory. I was coming home early from a doctor's appointment when I heard voices in your study. Angela and Eric were there, and they were planning your death. Michael's face went pale. You never told me you were pregnant. I lost the baby in the fire. The words came out flat, emotionless. She'd cried all her tears for that lost child years ago. The stress, the trauma. My body couldn't hold on to it. Michael closed his eyes. Pain etched across his features. Mary, I'm so sorry. They were talking about making it look like an accident. Barbara continued, needing to get through this before her courage failed. Angela would play the grieving widow, inherit everything. Eric would disappear for a while, then come back as her support system. Eventually they'd marry and control the entire Taylor empire together. How long had they been planning it? Months, maybe years. Angela had been cultivating you as a target even before we met. Barbara's voice turned bitter. Remember how she just happened to show up at that charity gala where you were speaking? How she seemed so interested in your work, your vision for the company. Michael's hands clenched into fists. She was hunting me, like a spider spinning a web. But when you met me instead, fell in love with me, married me, it complicated their plans. They had to wait, bide their time, figure out how to get me out of the picture. So they were going to kill us both. Barbara nodded. That night, When I confronted Eric about what I'd overheard, he was so calm about it, like he'd been expecting me to find out eventually. He said they could do this the easy way or the hard way, but either way, I was going to disappear. She stood up, pacing to the kitchenette, needing distance from the memories. He showed me pictures, Michael. Pictures of Sarah at her preschool, walking to the playground, getting on the school bus. He knew her routine better than I did. He threatened our daughter. He said accidents happen to little girls all the time. They wander away from babysitters, fall downstairs, eat something they shouldn't. Barbara's voice cracked. He was so specific about how it could happen that I knew he'd done this before. Michael was quiet for a long moment, absorbing the horror of what she was telling him. So, you agreed to disappear. I had 48 hours to make it happen. Eric said if I was still alive and breathing after that, Sarah would have her accident the next day. Barbara wiped tears from her eyes. I spent 2 days planning my own death, and then I burned our life to the ground. The fire. I started it myself, used gasoline from the garage, made sure it would burn hot and fast. Eric had already arranged for the body. Some poor homeless woman who died of an overdose. He had contacts at the morgue, people who could be bought. Michael shook his head in disbelief. How did you get out? Through the back door, into the woods. I had a bag hidden there with cash. New identification papers Eric had provided. I watched from the trees as the fire department arrived, as they carried out the body they thought was me. Barbara's voice grew distant. I watched you cry over my coffin. Michael, do you know what that does to a person? Then what? I disappeared, became Barbara Clark, a woman with no past and no connections. Eric had given me enough money to start over, but just barely. A studio apartment in a bad neighborhood, a minimum wage job cleaning office buildings. He wanted to make sure I stayed desperate, stayed dependent on him. Michael turned back to the window. And Sarah. For 10 years I thought she was safe. Eric left her alone, let her grow up normally. I'd watch her sometimes from a distance. School plays, soccer games, birthday parties. I was always careful. Never got too close, but I needed to see her. I never knew. You weren't supposed to. I became an expert at being invisible. Barbara's laugh was bitter. Funny how the skills you learn as a janitor, being overlooked, blending into the background, come in handy when you're stalking your own daughter. Michael's shoulders sagged. All those years, I was raising her alone, and you were out there watching. I wanted to come back so many times. When she had nightmares about me, when she asked why I had to die, when she cried on Mother's Day. Barbara's voice broke completely, but Eric made it clear that any contact would mean her death. Until she turned 15. She started asking questions. Smart questions. Sarah always was brilliant. Just like her father. Despite everything, Barbara smiled. She went to the library, looked up newspaper articles about the fire. She found inconsistencies in the police report, problems with the timeline. Michael turned around, his expression urgent. What kind of inconsistencies? The body was identified too quickly. The dental records were processed faster than they should have been. The fire department's response time didn't match the emergency call logs. Barbara shook her head in admiration. Our daughter figured out in 3 weeks what the police never bothered to investigate. She knew you were alive. She suspected. And when a 15-year-old girl starts asking the right questions in the right places, word gets back to Eric. Barbara's voice turned cold. He decided she was too dangerous to leave alone. The school trip. Washington, D.C. She was supposed to be touring the Smithsonian with her class instead. Eric's people grabbed her during lunch break, made it look like she'd wandered off and gotten lost in the city. Barbara closed her eyes against the memory. The police searched for weeks. You offered $1 million reward, but she was already gone. Michael's voice was dangerous. Where did he take her? I don't know exactly. Somewhere remote, isolated. He sends me proof of life videos every few months. Just enough to show me she's alive, to keep me compliant. Barbara pulled out her phone with trembling hands. The last one was 3 weeks ago. She found the video file and handed the phone to Michael on the small screen. A young woman with Michael's dark hair and Barbara's blue eyes sat in what looked like a cabin room. She was reading a book, seemingly calm, but Barbara could see the sadness in her daughter's posture. She's beautiful, Michael whispered, his voice thick with emotion. She looks just like you did at that age. She has your stubbornness, your intelligence, Barbara took the phone back. Eric says she's been cooperative, that she understands her situation and doesn't try to escape. Cooperative. Michael's voice was flat. Our daughter has been held prisoner for 5 years and she's cooperative. She's surviving, Michael. That's what matters. No. Michael's voice was steel. What matters is getting her back and making Eric Price pay for what he's done to our family. Barbara felt a spark of hope. How? First, we need to know exactly what Eric's planning. You said Angela was supposed to report back to him about the poisoning. Yes. When she realizes you're not dead, then we need to control that narrative. Michael was thinking out loud now, his business mind taking over. If Eric thinks his plan failed, he'll panic, maybe make mistakes, maybe... Barbara's phone buzzed, a text message from an unknown number, but she knew exactly who it was from. Your friend survived the night. Disappointing. Time for a face-to-face meeting. You know where. 1 hour. Michael read the message over her shoulder. He knows. Angela must have told him. Barbara's voice was barely a whisper. Oh God, Michael, if he thinks I've betrayed him completely, he'll hurt Sarah. Barbara nodded, terror washing over her. I have to go. I have to meet with him. Try to convince him that I'm still under his control. No. Michael's voice was firm. You're not going anywhere near Eric Price alone. I don't have a choice. If I don't show up, if he thinks I've turned against him, then we'll convince him you haven't. Michael pulled out his own phone. But we're going to do this smart. No more running. No more hiding. It's time to end this. The abandoned warehouse on Chicago's South Side looked exactly like the kind of place where people disappeared forever. Barbara pulled her beat-up Honda into the empty parking lot, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. Through her earpiece, she could hear Michael's voice, steady and reassuring despite the circumstances. Remember, we just need information. Don't take any unnecessary risks. Barbara touched the tiny recording device hidden in her jacket collar. Michael's security team had wired her with enough surveillance equipment to record a rock concert. But it all felt inadequate against Eric Price's paranoia. I can do this, she whispered, more to herself than to Michael. I know you can. We're right outside if anything goes wrong. Barbara stepped out of her car and walked toward the warehouse entrance. The building had been abandoned for years, its windows boarded up and graffiti covering every surface. It was the perfect place for Eric to conduct his shadow business. Isolated, forgotten, invisible to the outside world. The heavy metal door was already cracked open. Barbara pushed through and found herself in a cavernous space filled with rusted machinery and years of neglect. Dust motes danced in the shafts of sunlight that filtered through broken skylights overhead. Right on time, Barbara, or should I say Mary. Eric Price stepped out from behind a stack of shipping containers, and Barbara's blood ran cold. He looked exactly the same as he had 15 years ago. Tall, lean, with prematurely silver hair and cold blue eyes. The car accident that had supposedly killed him hadn't left so much as a scar. Hello, Eric. Barbara kept her voice steady, though every instinct screamed at her to run. You know, I always wondered when this day would come. Eric began walking slowly around her, like a predator circling prey. When you'd finally crack under the pressure, when the love you thought you'd buried would surface again. I don't know what you're talking about. Eric laughed, the sound echoing off the warehouse walls. Please, you think I don't have eyes and ears everywhere. You think I didn't know the moment Michael Taylor stepped foot in your pathetic little apartment. Barbara's heart sank. Of course Eric had been watching her. He'd been watching her for 15 years. You want to know the beautiful thing about what I've built here? Eric gestured around the warehouse. It's not just about money, though the Taylor fortune is certainly appealing. It's about control. Pure, absolute control over people's lives. He pulled out a tablet and swiped across the screen. Suddenly, Barbara was looking at live surveillance footage of her apartment building. The timestamp showed it was happening right now. I know Michael's security team is positioned outside. I know you're wearing a wire. I know everything, Mary, because I always have. Eric's smile was cold as winter. Did you really think you could outsmart me after all these years? Barbara fought to keep her expression neutral. What do you want, Eric? What I've always wanted. Complete compliance, you see. Last night's little hiccup with the poisoned tea was disappointing, but not unexpected. I always knew there was a chance you might develop feelings for your surveillance target. Eric began pacing again, his hands clasped behind his back like a professor giving a lecture. The original plan was simple. Angela marries Michael, gains access to his fortune and his trust. I remain dead to the world, pulling strings from the shadows. Eventually, Michael has an unfortunate accident. Angela inherits everything, and we control one of the largest hotel empires in the world. But it wasn't working fast enough, Barbara said, understanding dawning. Exactly. 3 years of marriage, and Michael still kept his financial affairs separate from Angela's. Prenups are such inconvenient things. Eric's voice turned bitter. We needed a more direct approach. He swiped to another screen on his tablet, showing what looked like financial documents. Do you know what Michael Taylor is worth, Mary? Really worth. Not just the hotels, but the real estate, the investments, the offshore accounts. Barbara shook her head. $4.7 billion. That's billion with a B. Eric's eyes gleamed with greed. Enough money to buy small countries, enough power to control politicians, judges, entire industries. So you decided to poison him. Angela decided to poison him. I simply provided the means and the opportunity. Eric's tone was casual, as if they were discussing the weather. Unfortunately, you decided to play hero. Barbara took a deep breath. I couldn't let him die. Couldn't, or wouldn't. Eric stepped closer, his voice dropping to a whisper. Tell me, Mary, in all these years of watching him from afar, of cleaning his hotel rooms and listening to his phone calls, did you ever stop loving him? The question hit like a physical blow. Barbara felt tears spring to her eyes despite her best efforts to stay strong. I thought so. Eric smiled triumphantly, smiled. Love makes people so wonderfully predictable, so easy to manipulate. He turned the tablet around again, and Barbara's world collapsed. On the screen was Sarah. Not a recording this time, but live footage. Her daughter was sitting in what looked like a small room, reading a book by lamplight. She looked older now, more mature, but unmistakably their daughter. She's beautiful, isn't she? 20 years old now, brilliant like her father, stubborn like her mother. Eric's voice was almost fond. Do you want to know what she's been doing for the past 5 years, Mary? Barbara couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Seeing Sarah alive and well should have been a relief, but the casual way Eric displayed her like a trophy made Barbara's skin crawl. She's been writing, Eric continued. Stories, journals, letters to parents she thought would never read them. But here's the interesting part. She's also been documenting everything she observes about her. Situation. The camera angle shifted, and Barbara could see Sarah was indeed writing in a notebook, her expression focused and determined. Your daughter has been keeping detailed records of my operation for 5 years. Guard schedules, visitor patterns, overheard conversations. She thinks she's gathering evidence for some future escape or rescue. Eric chuckled. What she doesn't realize is that her little investigation has actually been quite helpful. She's identified security weaknesses I never would have noticed otherwise. You bastard, Barbara whispered. Now, Sarah has been treated well, fed regularly, given books and educational materials, even allowed supervised outdoor time. She's hardly suffering. She's a prisoner. She's an asset, a very valuable asset that ensures your continued cooperation. Eric's expression hardened. But that cooperation seems to be wavering, doesn't it, Mary? Barbara forced herself to meet his gaze. What do you want from me? Simple. You're going to help us finish what we started. Eric pulled up another screen, showing architectural blueprints. These are the plans for Michael's private residence, security systems, guard rotations, entry points, information that only someone with intimate access could provide. Barbara's stomach dropped. You want me to help you break into his house? I want you to help me finish the job Angela started. Michael Taylor is going to die, Mary. The only question is whether Sarah lives to see her 21st birthday. The threat hung in the air like poison gas. Barbara could hear her own heartbeat thundering in her ears, could feel the recording device against her collar capturing every word of Eric's confession. You're insane, she said quietly. I'm thorough. 20 years I've been planning this, Mary. 20 years of careful positioning, strategic marriages, calculated risks. I killed Michael's parents to put him in control of the company early. I orchestrated your disappearance to remove a protective element. I've eliminated competitors, silenced whistleblowers, and built a network of corruption that reaches into every level of Chicago society. Eric's voice was growing more animated now, more excited. He was enjoying himself, reveling in the reveal of his master plan. And now, after 2 decades of preparation, Michael Taylor is finally going to give me what I deserve, what I've earned. He'll never just hand over his fortune. He will when he thinks it's the only way to save his daughter. Eric smiled coldly. You see, tomorrow morning, Michael is going to receive a very special video message. Sarah, explaining that she's been kidnapped and that her life depends on his cooperation. He'll have 24 hours to transfer his complete financial holdings to accounts I control, or Sarah dies. Barbara felt sick. And after he pays, both he and Sarah will have tragic accidents. Gas leaks are so unpredictable, don't you think? And you, my dear Mary, will disappear again, permanently this time. Eric stepped closer, his cold eyes boring into hers. Unless, of course, you decide to be helpful. Provide me with the security information I need to make Michael's death look like a home invasion gone wrong. In which case, Sarah might survive, might even be returned to her loving mother. The choice he was offering wasn't really a choice at all. Either way, Michael died. Either way, Eric won. But Barbara had one advantage Eric didn't know about. She wasn't alone this time. I need time to think about it, she said. You have until midnight tonight. After that, the offer expires, and Sarah pays the price for your disloyalty. Eric turned away, dismissing her. Don't disappoint me again, Mary. You know what happens to people who disappoint me. Barbara's hands shook as she removed the recording equipment in the back of Michael's armored SUV. The conversation with Eric had been captured in crystal clear audio, every word of his confession preserved for posterity, but all she could think about was the live footage of Sarah, sitting alone in that small room, writing in her notebook like she had hope that someone would eventually read her words. He's completely insane, she whispered, pulling the tiny microphone from her collar. 20 years of planning, and he thinks he's some kind of criminal mastermind. Michael was sitting across from her, his face granite hard as he listened to the playback through noise-canceling headphones, his security chief. Agent Martinez was taking notes on a tablet, occasionally pausing the recording to make annotations. The architectural blueprints he showed you, Michael said, pulling off the headphones. Did you recognize the location? Barbara closed her eyes, trying to recall the details. It looked like a cabin or small house. Wood construction, single story, but the camera angle was limited. I couldn't see much beyond Sarah's immediate surroundings. We ran the audio through voice analysis software, Martinez interrupted, looking up from his tablet. The background sounds suggest rural location, possibly near water. We're cross-referencing property records for anything Eric Price might have purchased or rented in the past 5 years. Michael leaned forward, his expression intense. What about the guards, security measures? He mentioned guard schedules in Sarah's writing, but I didn't see any actual security personnel in the footage. Barbara tried to remember every detail. The room looked normal, like a bedroom, not a prison cell. If I hadn't known she was being held against her will, it could have passed for a college dorm room. That's his mo, Martinez said grimly. Make the victims comfortable enough that they don't constantly try to escape. Psychological manipulation instead of physical restraint. Michael's phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen, then showed it to Barbara. The caller ID read, Angela Taylor. She's probably wondering why her husband isn't dead yet, Barbara said bitterly. Michael answered the call, putting it on speaker. Hello, Angela. Darling. Angela's voice was honey-sweet, but Barbara could hear the underlying tension. How are you feeling this morning? You left so early, I didn't get a chance to check on you. I'm fine. Just some business to take care of. Michael's voice was carefully neutral. I was so worried when you didn't come to bed last night. That awful janitor and her stories about water damage. I hope you weren't too uncomfortable in the guest suite. Barbara felt her jaw clench. Angela was fishing, trying to figure out exactly what had happened and whether Michael suspected anything. Actually, it was probably for the best, Michael said smoothly. I got a call from the lab this morning about some routine testing they do on the hotel's water supply. Apparently, there was a contamination issue in the presidential suite's pipes. Could have made me seriously ill. There was a long pause before Angela responded. And when she did, her voice had a slight edge. Contamination. What kind of contamination? Chemical runoff from some old cleaning supplies, apparently. The kind that could cause severe stomach problems, maybe even heart palpitations. Michael's eyes met Barbara's as he spoke. Good thing that janitor warned me, or I might have gotten very sick. How fortunate. Angela's voice was tight now. Well, I'm just glad you're safe, darling. Will you be home for dinner tonight? Actually, I'm going to be working late. Don't wait up for me. Of course I love you, Michael. Goodbye. Angela. Michael ended the call and immediately turned to Martinez. She's going to contact Eric the moment she hangs up. How much time do we have? Eric said midnight, Barbara answered. But if he realizes we're onto him, then we move now. Michael was already speed dialing another number. This is Taylor. I need the helicopter fueled and ready in 20 minutes, and get me a tactical team. Full gear, night vision, the works. As Michael coordinated with his security team, Barbara felt a mixture of hope and terror building in her chest. After 5 years of helplessness, they were finally going to try to rescue Sarah. But Eric Price didn't make mistakes often, and when cornered, he had a history of eliminating problems permanently. Sir, Martinez said, looking up from his own phone. We got a hit on the property search. Eric Price purchased a cabin in Wisconsin under a shell company 3 years ago. Remote location. 40 acres, nearest neighbor is 2 miles away. Michael grabbed the tablet, studying the satellite images Martinez had pulled up. How long to get there? By helicopter. Maybe 90 minutes. Do it. Michael's voice was steel. I want surveillance drones in the air first. Thermal imaging. The full package. If Sarah is in that cabin, I want to know exactly what we're walking into before we make a move. Barbara watched the preparations unfold with growing amazement. This wasn't just a desperate father trying to save his daughter. This was a coordinated military-style operation. Michael had resources she'd never imagined. Connections that could mobilize teams of specialists at a moment's notice. Barbara, Michael said, turning to her. I need you to stay here. What? No? The words burst out of her before she could stop them. She's my daughter too, Michael. I'm not sitting this out. You're not trained for this kind of operation. If something goes wrong, I want to be there. Barbara's voice was fierce. I've spent 5 years watching our daughter from a distance. 5 years being helpless while that monster controlled our lives. I'm not staying behind now. Michael studied her face for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. You stay with the command team. No heroics, no taking unnecessary risks. Understood. Understood. 40 minutes later, they were airborne in Michael's private helicopter, racing across the Illinois countryside toward Wisconsin. Below them, the landscape rolled by in a blur of farmland and forest. Barbara pressed her face to the window, her stomach churning with anticipation and fear. Through her headset, she could hear the tactical team coordinating with the surveillance drones that had gone ahead. The voices were calm, professional, but the underlying tension was unmistakable. Target acquired, came a voice through the radio. Single structure, approximately 2,000 square feet. Heat signatures show 3 individuals inside, 2 adults, 1 younger person in the northeast bedroom. Barbara's heart leaped. Sarah, her daughter, was really there. What about external security? Michael's voice was crisp, businesslike. Minimal, 2 guards on patrol, standard weapons, no heavy fortifications. This guy's been relying on isolation and secrecy rather than firepower. Michael nodded grimly. That's about to change. As they approached the landing zone, a clearing about half a mile from the cabin, Barbara could see other helicopters already on the ground. Michael's security team was larger and more sophisticated than she'd realized. What looked like a small army of tactical specialists was preparing for the assault. Remember, Michael said as they touched down, Eric Price has been planning this for 20 years. He's smart, he's ruthless, and he's not going to go down without a fight. Barbara climbed out of the helicopter, her legs unsteady from adrenaline and altitude. Around her, men and women in tactical gear were checking weapons, studying satellite photos, speaking into radio headsets in low, urgent voices. Agent Martinez approached them with a tablet showing real-time footage from the surveillance drones. The heat signature in the northeast room hasn't moved in 20 minutes. Could be sleeping? Could be restrained? The 2 adult signatures are mobile, moving between rooms. Eric and who else? Michael asked. Unknown. Could be Angela. Could be additional security. Martinez zoomed in on the cabin layout. We're going in through 3 entry points simultaneously. Fast, quiet, overwhelming force. Barbara stared at the screen, at the small heat signature that represented her daughter. So close now. After 5 years of not knowing where Sarah was, whether she was alive or dead, her baby was less than half a mile away. What's the timeline? Michael asked. We move in 15 minutes, just after sunset, when their night vision will be compromised, but ours won't be. Martinez looked between Michael and Barbara. Sir, I have to ask again. Are you sure you want to be on the assault team? This could go sideways fast. Michael's expression was stone. That's my daughter in there. I'm going in. He turned to Barbara. You'll monitor from here with the command team. The moment we have Sarah secure, you'll know. Barbara nodded, not trusting her voice. As the tactical teams moved out into the growing darkness, she found herself alone with the radio operator and a bank of monitors showing multiple camera feeds from the approaching soldiers. Through the static and whispered radio chatter, she heard the countdown begin. Alpha team in position. Bravo team ready. Charlie team go. Barbara held her breath as she watched tiny figures on the thermal imaging screens converge on the cabin. 5 years of waiting. 5 years of helplessness. All coming down to the next few minutes. Breach in 3, 2, 1. The screens erupted in chaos as the assault teams stormed the cabin from 3 different directions simultaneously. And then, cutting through the radio chatter like a knife, came Sarah's voice, older than Barbara remembered, but unmistakably her daughter. Dad, is that really you? Barbara collapsed into a chair, tears streaming down her face. For the first time in 5 years, their daughter was free. The reunion was everything Barbara had dreamed of, and more devastating than she could have imagined. Sarah, 20 years old now, tall and graceful like her father, but with Barbara's determined blue eyes, stood in the cabin doorway looking between her parents with a mixture of disbelief and carefully controlled emotion. Mom. Sarah's voice cracked on the word. 5 years of suppressed grief and hope colliding in that single syllable. Barbara ran to her daughter, wrapping her in an embrace that felt like coming back to life. Sarah was taller than her now, stronger, but she still fit perfectly in Barbara's arms like she had when she was 5 years old. My baby, Barbara whispered, tears streaming down her face. Oh God, Sarah. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry I let this happen to you. I knew you were alive, Sarah said fiercely, holding her mother tight. I always knew. Eric told me you were dead, but I could feel it. You were out there somewhere. Michael joined the embrace, his own eyes wet with tears. For a moment, the Taylor family was whole again. 15 years of separation and pain momentarily forgotten in the miracle of being together. But the moment was shattered by Agent Martinez's urgent voice on the radio. Sir, we have a problem. Eric Price isn't here. Michael pulled back, his expression immediately shifting to high alert. What do you mean he's not here? The cabin's empty except for Sarah. No sign of Eric or any other occupants, but sir, Martinez's voice was grim. You need to see what we found. They made their way to what had been Sarah's room, where Martinez was standing over a desk covered with notebooks, photographs, and what looked like detailed surveillance reports. Barbara's breath caught as she recognized the handwriting. Sarah's careful script, filling page after page with meticulous observations. Your daughter's been busy, Martinez said, his tone mixing admiration with concern. This isn't just a diary. It's a complete intelligence operation. Sarah stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. I wasn't going to sit around feeling sorry for myself. If Eric thought he could use me as leverage forever, he was wrong. She picked up one of the notebooks and flipped it open. The pages were filled with detailed sketches, guard schedules, overheard phone conversations, and behavioral analysis that would have impressed a trained FBI profiler. I mapped his entire operation, Sarah continued. Every property he owns, every person who works for him, every weakness in his security. I've been preparing for this rescue for 5 years. Michael stared at his daughter with a mixture of pride and horror. Sarah, this is incredibly dangerous. If Eric had discovered what you were doing, he did discover it. Sarah's voice was calm, matter of fact. About 6 months ago, that's when I realized he wasn't just going to let me go eventually. He was planning to kill all of us. You, me, Mom. Once he got what he wanted, Barbara felt ice water flooding her veins. What do you mean he discovered it? Sarah pulled out a small recording device from her desk drawer. Eric's not as smart as he thinks he is. He gets sloppy when he's angry, and he's been very angry lately. His original plan was falling apart, and he was starting to panic. She pressed play on the device, and Eric's voice filled the room, captured with crystal clarity. 20 years of planning, and now it's all falling apart because of one sentimental woman who can't let go of the past. Well, fine. If Mary wants to play hero, she can die a hero. All three of them can have their precious family reunion in hell. The recording continued, revealing Eric's backup plan in chilling detail. If the poisoning failed, if his control over Barbara wavered, he would eliminate the entire Taylor family in a coordinated attack designed to look like a home invasion gone wrong. He's been planning this contingency for months, Sarah said, stopping the recording. That's why I made sure you'd find me here tonight. This cabin isn't just where he was keeping me, it's bait. Michael's security training kicked in. Bait for what? For you, Dad. Eric knew that eventually, you'd figure out I was alive and come looking for me. So he set up this whole rescue scenario to draw you out into the open. Sarah's voice was steady, but Barbara could see the fear in her daughter's eyes. He's not here because he doesn't need to be. He's somewhere else, probably with Angela, putting the final phase of his plan into motion. Agent Martinez was already on his radio, coordinating with the command team. All units, we need immediate surveillance on the Taylor residence. This could be a diversion, but it was too late. Michael's phone rang, and when he answered it, Angela's voice came through the speaker with sickening sweetness. Hello, darling. I hope you're enjoying your little family reunion. The blood drained from Michael's face. Angela, did you really think Eric wouldn't anticipate your heroic rescue attempt? Really, Michael? After all these years, you should know him better than that. Barbara could hear the malicious glee in Angela's voice, the satisfaction of a predator who'd finally cornered her prey. What do you want, Angela? What we've always wanted. Your complete financial surrender. But now the terms have changed. Angela's tone turned ice cold. You have 1 hour to transfer every penny of your fortune to the accounts Eric will send you. If you comply, your family lives. If you don't. The line went dead. Michael immediately called his head of security at the main office. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried the home security system. No response. His executive assistant, his legal team, his closest advisors, every call went unanswered. He's cut us off, Michael said grimly. Eric's people have taken control of our entire communication network. Sarah was studying her notebooks with fierce concentration. Not necessarily, Dad. Do you still have the emergency satellite phone in your helicopter? Yes. But Eric doesn't know about that. It's not on any of the equipment lists I was able to observe. Sarah looked up, her eyes blazing with determination. I also know something Eric doesn't think I know. She flipped to a specific page in her notebook, revealing a detailed floor plan of what looked like an office building. This is Eric's real headquarters, not some abandoned warehouse or remote cabin. He's been operating out of the Meridian building downtown, 32nd floor, northeast corner. He thinks it's completely secure because it's hidden in plain sight. Barbara stared at the drawing. How do you know this? Because he got careless 6 months ago when he thought I was broken and compliant. Brought me there for a meeting with some of his other assets. He wanted to show off his operation, prove how powerless we all were against him. Sarah's smile was sharp, dangerous, so much like her father when he was planning a hostile takeover. What Eric doesn't know is that I memorized everything. Security codes, guard rotations, the location of his computer servers, even the password to his main financial accounts. She tapped the notebook. I've been waiting 5 years for the chance to use this information. Michael was already moving toward the helicopter. Martinez, I need a tactical team at the Meridian building in 20 minutes. Full assault gear. Sir, if this is a trap, it's definitely a trap. Michael's voice was cold steel. But Sarah's right. Eric's been planning for us to react emotionally, to stumble around in panic while he picks us off. Time to show him what happens when you threaten a Taylor. As they boarded the helicopter for the flight back to Chicago, Barbara caught sight of her daughter's expression in the window reflection. There was no fear there anymore. No trace of the victim Eric had tried to create. Sarah Taylor had spent 5 years learning her enemy's weaknesses, and now she was ready to destroy him. Mom, Sarah said quietly as the helicopter lifted off. "There's something else you need to know about Eric's plan." Barbara's stomach clenched. "What?" "He's not just after Dad's money, he's after yours too." Sarah's voice was barely audible over the rotor noise. "Eric knows about the trust fund Grandpa Taylor set up for me, the one that activates when I turn 21 next month. $50 million that Eric can only access if I'm declared mentally incompetent, or if my parents are dead and he becomes my legal guardian." The full scope of Eric's plan hit Barbara like a physical blow. Not just Michael's billions, but Sarah's inheritance too. Eric hadn't been keeping Sarah alive out of any twisted sense of mercy. He'd been waiting for her to reach legal age so he could steal her birthright as well. "Next month," Barbara whispered. "Next week, actually," Sarah said with grim satisfaction. "My 21st birthday is in 6 days, which means Eric's running out of time just as much as we are." As Chicago's skyline came into view, Barbara realized they weren't flying toward a rescue anymore. They were flying toward the final battle in a war that had been going on for 20 years. And for the first time since this nightmare began, she believed they might actually win. The Meridian building stood like a gleaming tower of glass and steel against Chicago's night sky, its windows reflecting the city lights like 1,000 watching eyes. From the helicopter circling at a safe distance, Barbara could see the building's 32nd floor, Eric's hidden fortress in the clouds. Thermal imaging shows 6 heat signatures on the target floor, Agent Martinez reported through the headset. 2 in the main office area, 4 spread throughout the space. "They're definitely expecting us." Sarah was studying the building's layout on a tablet, her 5 years of captivity having transformed her into an expert on Eric's operations. "The main server room is here," she said, pointing to the northeast corner. "That's where Eric keeps all his financial records, his blackmail materials, everything. If we can get to those servers, we can prove everything," Michael finished. 20 years of crimes, all documented. Barbara watched her husband and daughter work together, their brilliant minds in perfect sync. It was like watching a glimpse of the family they could have been if Eric hadn't torn them apart 15 years ago. "The security codes change every 6 hours, Sarah continued. "But I memorized the pattern. The next window opens in 12 minutes. Michael nodded grimly. "That's our entry point, Martinez. Position your teams at the building entrances. No one gets in or out until this is over." "What about Eric?" Barbara asked. "He's not going to just surrender when we show up." Sarah's expression was cold. "Far older than her 20 years. Eric spent 5 years underestimating me. He thinks I'm a broken victim who's been sitting in that cabin feeling sorry for herself. He has no idea what I've really been doing." She pulled out a small device that looked like a modified cell phone. "This is connected directly to Eric's computer network. I've been slowly downloading his files for months, building a complete picture of his criminal empire, bank accounts, assassination records, the names of everyone he's blackmailed or murdered. It's all here." Barbara stared at her daughter in amazement. "How did you manage to hack his system from a cabin in Wisconsin?" Eric got overconfident. "He gave me internet access because he thought I was harmless, that I'd just use it to read books and feel sorry for myself." Sarah's smile was sharp. "Instead, I taught myself everything about cybersecurity, social engineering, and financial crime. Turns out 5 years of captivity is plenty of time to get a graduate-level education in destroying your captor." The helicopter began its descent toward the building's rooftop landing pad. Through the windows, Barbara could see figures moving on the 32nd floor, Eric and his people, preparing for what they thought would be their final victory. "Remember," Michael said as they prepared to disembark, "Eric Price has been planning this confrontation for 20 years. He's smart, he's ruthless, and he's not going down without a fight." "Good," Sarah said quietly. "Neither are we." The assault began with military precision. Michael's security team breached the building from 3 different access points, while Sarah guided them through Eric's security systems, using codes she'd memorized during her captivity. Within minutes, they had control of the entire floor. Barbara followed the main team through corridors lined with expensive artwork and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. This wasn't the lair of a desperate criminal. It was the headquarters of a man who saw himself as a legitimate businessman, just one who happened to deal in murder and extortion. They found Eric in his main office, standing calmly behind a massive mahogany desk as if he'd been expecting them. Angela was there too. Her perfect composure finally cracked, fear visible in her green eyes. Well, Eric said, with that same cold smile Barbara remembered from 15 years ago. The Taylor family, reunited at last. How touching. Michael stepped forward, his security team flanking him. It's over, Eric. We have everything. The recordings, the financial records, witness testimony, 20 years of crime, all documented. Eric laughed, the sound echoing off the office walls. Do you really think I've survived this long without contingency plans? Even if you somehow manage to arrest me, even if you think you've won, there are dead man switches in place. People who will continue my work if anything happens to me. Actually, Sarah said, stepping out from behind her father, those contingency plans are already taken care of. Eric's confident expression faltered for the first time. Sarah, my dear girl, I see you've been busy playing family reunion, but surely you understand. I understand that you're finished. Sarah held up the modified device. While you were planning your grand finale, I was systematically dismantling your entire operation, your offshore accounts, frozen, your blackmail materials, copied and sent to the FBI, your network of corrupt officials. They're all receiving visits from federal agents right about now. Eric's face went white. That's impossible. You were isolated, monitored. You gave me internet access and underestimated my intelligence. Fatal mistake. Sarah's voice was ice cold. Did you really think I spent 5 years sitting in that cabin feeling sorry for myself? I used every minute to study you, to learn your weaknesses, to prepare for this moment. Barbara watched in amazement as her daughter, barely 21 years old, calmly destroyed the man who had terrorized their family for 2 decades. The frightened 5-year-old who had cried for her mother was gone, replaced by a brilliant young woman who had turned her captivity into her weapon. You killed my grandparents, Sarah continued, her voice never wavering. You faked my mother's death. You held me prisoner for 5 years. You tried to poison my father, and you thought I would just let that go. Eric was backing away now, his composure completely shattered. Sarah, you don't understand the bigger picture. I understand perfectly. Sarah pressed a button on her device. Agent Morrison. Yes, this is Sarah Taylor. We're ready for you. The office doors burst open as FBI agents flooded in, their weapons drawn. Leading them was a tall woman in a navy suit who moved with the confidence of someone used to making high-stakes arrests. Eric Price, Agent Morrison announced. You're under arrest for conspiracy, murder, kidnapping, extortion, and about 40 other federal crimes. Angela Price Taylor. You're also under arrest as an accessory to attempted murder. As the FBI agents placed Eric and Angela in handcuffs, Eric looked directly at Sarah with something that might have been respect. 5 years, he said quietly. 5 years I had you under my complete control, and you were planning this the entire time. Every single day, Sarah replied. You taught me patience, Eric. You taught me how to watch and wait and plan. You just didn't realize I was planning your destruction. Barbara felt tears streaming down her face as she watched her daughter. So strong, so brilliant, so unbroken despite everything Eric had done to her. Michael wrapped his arm around Barbara's shoulders as Eric and Angela were led away in handcuffs. It's over, he whispered. It's finally over. But Sarah wasn't finished. As the last of the FBI agents filed out, she turned to her parents with an expression Barbara didn't quite recognize. There's something else, Sarah said quietly. Something I need to tell you both. Barbara felt a chill of apprehension. What is it, sweetheart? Sarah pulled out one final notebook from her jacket. This one different from the others. Older, more worn, filled with what looked like personal observations rather than intelligence gathering. The night Eric took me, 5 years ago, I wasn't just researching Mom's death. Sarah's voice was soft, almost apologetic. I was researching Eric's entire history, going back decades, and I found something that changes everything we thought we knew about this family. She opened the notebook to a specific page covered with genealogical charts and newspaper clippings. Eric Price isn't just some business associate who got greedy, Sarah said, her words falling like stones into still water. He's family. He's Dad's half-brother, Grandpa Taylor's illegitimate son, born to a mistress and hidden away his entire life. The revelation hit Barbara like a physical blow. Michael staggered backward, his face white with shock. That's impossible, Michael whispered. 25 years ago, When Eric was written out of Grandpa's will for being born out of wedlock, he swore revenge against the entire Taylor family. Sarah's voice was steady, but Barbara could see the pain in her daughter's eyes. Everything that happened to us, Mom's fake death, my kidnapping, the attempts on Dad's life, it was never about money. It was about a bastard son taking revenge on the legitimate heir who got everything he thought he deserved. The truth settled over them like a shroud. 20 years of terror, 15 years of separation, 5 years of Sarah's captivity, all because of a family secret that had festered into something monstrous. Barbara looked out the window at Chicago's glittering skyline, thinking about the twisted family reunion that had finally come to an end. Justice had been served, but the scars would last forever. 1 year later, the morning sun streamed through the stained glass windows of St. Mary's Chapel, casting rainbow patterns across the stone floor where Michael and Mary had exchanged vows 26 years ago. Barbara, she would always think of herself as Mary when she was here, stood at the altar in a simple white dress, her hand trembling slightly as Michael slipped the wedding ring back onto her finger. "With this ring," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion, "I promise to love you through whatever comes. Death, disappearance, 15 years of believing you were gone. Nothing can separate us again." Barbara looked into the brown eyes she'd fallen in love with all those years ago, seeing new lines of wisdom and pain, but also hope. Behind him, Sarah stood as maid of honor, radiant in a blue dress that brought out her eyes. At 21, their daughter had grown into a remarkable young woman, brilliant, strong, and somehow unbroken despite everything Eric had done to her. "I promise to never leave you again," Barbara whispered, tears streaming down her face. "No matter what threats come, no matter what anyone tries to take from us, we face it together." The minister, the same elderly man who had married them the first time, smiled as he pronounced them husband and wife again. "You may kiss the bride again." Michael's kiss was gentle, reverent, like he still couldn't quite believe she was real. In the small congregation, just a handful of close friends and trusted employees, Barbara could see tears in nearly every eye. Their story had become legendary in Chicago, the tragic love story that had somehow found its happy ending. Later, at the reception in the Taylor Estates gardens, Barbara found herself standing with Sarah by the memorial fountain Michael had built in her honor 15 years ago. The inscription read, "Mary West Taylor, beloved wife and mother gone too soon." "We should probably change that," Sarah said with a wry smile, gesturing at the memorial. "Actually," Barbara said, "I think we should leave it. Mary West did die in that fire. In a way, Barbara Clark survived to protect her family. But today, I get to be Mary Taylor again." Sarah hugged her mother tightly. "I'm so proud of you, Mom. What you did, sacrificing everything to keep me and Dad safe. What I did was abandon my family when they needed me most." Barbara's voice was firm, but not harsh. "I thought I was protecting you, but I was really just running away from the fight. You're the one who spent 5 years actually fighting back. We all did what we had to do." Sarah pulled back, her expression serious. "And we all paid a price for it. But we're together now, and Eric and Angela are never going to hurt anyone again." Through the crowd, Barbara could see Michael talking with Agent Morrison, who had become something of a family friend over the past year. The FBI investigation into Eric's crimes had uncovered a network of corruption that reached into dozens of major corporations and government agencies. Eric Price was facing multiple life sentences, and Angela had accepted a plea deal that would keep her in prison for the next 30 years. "Any word on the final sentencing?" Barbara asked as Agent Morrison approached them. "Eric got 4 consecutive life sentences plus 200 years, just to make sure," Morrison said with satisfaction. The judge said it was one of the most comprehensive criminal enterprises she'd ever seen. 25 years of planning, dozens of victims, hundreds of millions in stolen assets. Sarah nodded grimly. "Good. He destroyed so many lives, not just ours." "Speaking of which," Morrison continued, "the restitution fund you established has helped almost 60 families affected by Eric's crimes. The foundation is doing incredible work." Barbara smiled, thinking about the Mary Taylor Foundation they had established 6 months ago, using a portion of the recovered stolen assets. They were helping families who had been torn apart by crime, providing legal assistance, counseling, and financial support for people trying to rebuild their lives. "It feels good to turn something positive out of all this pain," Barbara said. "And Sarah's work with missing persons cases has been extraordinary," Morrison added. "The Chicago PD says you've helped solve more cold cases in 6 months than some detectives manage in their entire careers." Sarah blushed slightly at the praise. After the trial, she had decided to use her unique experiences to help other families find their missing loved ones. Her combination of investigative skills, technological expertise, and deep understanding of criminal psychology made her incredibly effective at finding people who had vanished. "I just know what it's like to be lost," Sarah said simply. "And I know what it's like for families to never stop looking." As the afternoon wore on, Barbara found herself constantly amazed by the normalcy of it all. A wedding reception in their own backyard, with friends and family, and cake and dancing, after 15 years of living as someone else. 5 years of fear and separation. It felt almost surreal to be simply happy. Michael appeared at her side, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "Penny for your thoughts, Mrs. Taylor. Just thinking about how strange it is to be normal again." Barbara accepted the champagne gratefully. For so long, our lives were defined by crisis, by danger, by secrets. Now we're just a family having a party in our garden. "Boring suits you," Michael said with a grin. "Boring is vastly underrated." Barbara clinked her glass against his. "Though I have to admit, I'm still getting used to sleeping in the same bed as you again. We have the rest of our lives to get reacquainted." Michael's expression grew serious. "Mary, I want you to know. I understand why you did what you did. 15 years ago when Eric threatened Sarah, you made the only choice you could make. I forgive you completely." Barbara felt tears spring to her eyes. "I forgive myself too, finally. But Michael, if anything like that ever happens again, it won't." His voice was steel. "We face everything together from now on. No more secrets. No more sacrifices. We're stronger together than we ever were apart." As the sun began to set, Sarah approached them with a wrapped package. "I have something for you both. A wedding present." Barbara unwrapped the package to find a thick, leather-bound book. Opening it, she gasped. It was filled with photographs, documents, and letters spanning the past 15 years. Pictures of Sarah growing up that Michael had saved, copies of letters Barbara had written but never sent, newspaper clippings about the Taylor Foundation's work. "I thought you should have a record," Sarah said softly, "of all the years we were apart, all the ways we were still connected, even when we couldn't be together. Family isn't just about being in the same place. It's about carrying each other in your hearts no matter how far apart you are." The final page of the book contained a letter in Sarah's handwriting. "To Mom and Dad, thank you for never giving up on each other, and for never giving up on me. Thank you for teaching me that love is stronger than fear, that family is stronger than any enemy, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to let evil win. You are my heroes, and I am proud to be your daughter. Sarah." Barbara closed the book, holding it against her chest like the treasure it was. Around them, the party continued. Laughter and music and the sounds of celebration floating through the gardens. But in this moment, the 3 of them stood together in perfect peace, a family that had been broken apart and somehow found its way back together. "You know what the best part is?" Sarah said, looking between her parents with mischief in her eyes. "What's that, sweetheart?" Michael asked. "Eric spent 25 years trying to destroy our family, but all he really did was prove that nothing, not death, not disappearance, not years of separation, can break the bonds between people who truly love each other." Barbara looked at her husband and daughter, at the home they had fought so hard to reclaim, at the future that stretched out before them filled with possibility instead of fear. For the first time in 15 years, Mary Taylor was exactly where she belonged.